Fate is indifferent, the Stoics taught. It gives freely to some, withholds cruelly from others. But even in the coldest winds, we are not powerless. We endure. The winter wind bit through her worn-out jacket, but Emily Carter barely noticed as she moved past the neon-lit storefronts. She couldn't ignore the dull, gnawing ache in her belly, an ache born of hunger and the 6-month baby she carried, shivering with her on the sidewalk. She glanced up at a massive digital screen. Blasting the evening financial news, bathed in bright studio lights, was the face of a man she had once vowed to love forever. Benjamin Carter, her husband. A multimillionaire, adored and admired, while she trembled in the cold. Her heart twisted at the sight. How had life become so cruel? She had nothing, and he had everything. Emily had known hardship before, but nothing like this. That frigid night, the wind cut through her like knives straight to the bone. She pulled her coat tighter in a desperate attempt to stay warm as snowflakes whipped around her. In the distance, the glowing monitors of Los Angeles' downtown shimmered. On the largest screen, a face she couldn't forget. Benjamin Carter appeared, his name scrolling in bold text, Tech Visionary of the Year. The recorded applause roared behind him. He stood on a glittering stage filled with the powerful, the elite, cameras from CNN, CNBC, and local news beaming his success. Emily couldn't look away from that familiar face, that defined jaw, the faint smile that once gave her hope. He looked immaculate now, brimming with certainty. She hadn't seen him in nearly a year. Her chest clenched with the memory of the day he walked out, ambition and arguments about money eclipsing their love. She had tried to support him, reason with him, but every conversation turned into a fight. Then, the final blow. He would chase success on his own. The billboard shifted into a highlight reel. Benjamin shaking hands with Mark Cuban at a tech summit, unveiling a breakthrough product in San Francisco. Then the lavish parties. Benjamin in a custom tux, flanked by industry icons. She had never met them. The segment ended with the host crowning Benjamin Carter as America's newest business titan. And just like that, he vanished into the night as the screen blinked to a luxury car ad. Emily blinked away tears. Once, his arms had been her haven. Now, with his child inside her, she wandered the frozen streets alone, searching for shelter. She told herself not to cry. But the wave of emotion surged as she stared up at the ironic beauty of the city's Christmas lights. Everyone else seemed to be celebrating. She was barely surviving. Her hand moved to her belly, feeling a tiny flutter. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to the life within. It was a promise she meant to keep, though she didn't yet know how. She turned from the screen and stumbled forward. Her foot caught on a cracked slab of sidewalk. A sharp pain shot through her ankle, and she nearly collapsed. She clenched her teeth, scanning the crowd for help, but the passers-by, rushing with shopping bags and holiday plans, barely gave her a glance. That's what life had become after she left the tiny apartment where she and Benjamin once lived alone. Invisible. Emily's pride was bruised, but she refused to break. She walked past a bakery, and through its window the sight of warm pastries beckoned. The scent of fresh bread twisted her stomach. She had to save her last dollar for the cheapest room she could find, a place with peeling walls and barely working plumbing, but it was at least indoors. She stepped inside, bought a small roll, and devoured it in 3 quick bites. Outside again, the wind screamed louder, carrying the city's chaos with it. Still holding her belly, she made a decision. Tomorrow everything had to change. She would search every street for work, for help. She wouldn't let her baby come into the world wrapped in nothing but despair. But tonight, she just needed shelter, a place that wasn't a shadowed alley or a crumbling stairwell. Even if it meant spending her last few dollars, the baby's safety came first. As Emily turned from the glow of the downtown screens, one thought surged in her mind. Her husband, the man she had once loved with everything she had, was thriving. And she was cold, hungry, pregnant, and alone. Could the distance between them stretch any farther? Long before he graced the covers of tech magazines and stood on stages at elite summits, Benjamin Carter had been a dreamer. Just a kid scribbling code in the corner of the university library. Emily remembered the first time she saw him. It was her sophomore year, and she was majoring in English literature at UCLA. The back table of the library had always been her sanctuary, quiet and perfect for reading. She spotted him there, a junior in computer science, hunched over a laptop with a frustrated look that drew her in. Curious, compelled by the restless focus in his eyes, she had asked, "Need any help?" Even though she understood next to nothing about coding. Benjamin's tired face cracked into the slightest, shyest smile, and Emily remembered thinking, he's actually kind of adorable beneath all that pressure. They talked about his class project, an algorithm meant to streamline data transfer. Emily admitted she was more at home with Dickens and Whitman than HTML, and he had teased her for it, gently, playfully. From that moment on, they were always near each other. But beneath the ease of their conversations, Emily had felt a quiet fear that she didn't belong in his world. His laptop was newer than any she'd ever owned, his watch sleek and expensive. She had grown up in a house where money was tight and aspirations were modest. Being near him sparked not only fascination, but a silent, gnawing insecurity. Could someone like him ever truly want someone like her? Something about the way he looked at her, focused yet lost, made her heart pause. It was the first time in a long while she had felt seen. Under the library's dim fluorescent lights, surrounded by dusty volumes and whispered conversations, a spark had quietly begun to burn. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply there, undeniable. Their connection felt natural, almost effortless. He sparked her interest in the world of tech. She pulled him into long talks about classic novels, drawing parallels between character arcs and startup ambition. They began dating over Christmas break. Sweet, unpolished memories filled those early days. Late-night walks around campus, sharing dollar coffees from vending machines, discovering ramen shops tucked in alleyways of Westwood. They were both dreamers. Benjamin dreaming of launching a company that would redefine how people moved information, and Emily dreaming of becoming a novelist. The world had felt wide open then. She could still remember how he'd squeeze her hand whenever doubt crept in, as if to say, "We can survive anything." He used to squeeze her hand whenever she doubted herself, as if to say, "We'll get through anything." But as graduation loomed, financial pressure started to suffocate them. Benjamin, determined to make his mark in tech, pitched his software to local investors, but the rejections came fast and relentless. Meanwhile, Emily struggled to gain traction with her writing. Her short stories rarely got a response, and even internships slipped through her fingers. Neither family could offer more than emotional support. Benjamin's parents, who ran a modest real estate firm in Northern California, had always hoped he'd choose a more conventional career. They viewed his startup dreams with quiet disapproval. Emily's mother, battling chronic illness and buried in medical debt, could do little more than offer late-night phone calls filled with encouragement. They got married right after graduation. Nothing grand, just a quiet civil ceremony at the courthouse. Their honeymoon was a weekend trip to a roadside motel in Santa Barbara. It was all they could afford. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the bond between them. They returned to Los Angeles and rented a shoebox apartment in East Hollywood. Benjamin coded late into the night, while Emily worked at a downtown cafe and wrote in a spiral notebook during her breaks. Their love was fierce until cracks started to form. Benjamin became obsessed with success. Each rejection from an investor sent him spiraling into silence or frustration. Emily tried to lift him up, remind him that failure was part of the journey. But her hopefulness only seemed to fuel his resentment. Months passed. Bills stacked up. Benjamin took meetings with shady angel investors, desperate to make something work. Arguments about money became constant. Then, nearly 2 years into their marriage, it happened. Benjamin secured a major backer. A well-known tech investor, Kenneth Allard from Shark Tank, bought into Benjamin's new concept. Emily hoped that would bring peace. Instead, it widened the divide. Suddenly, Benjamin was on planes more than he was home, racing to corporate meetings, mingling with CEOs and venture capitalists. Glitzy events took the place of their ramen dinners. The man who once brought home tacos at midnight now came home rarely, and when he did, it was in silence. Their modest apartment was soon traded for a sleek condo overlooking Griffith Park. But the space only emphasized the distance between them. Benjamin's world was devoured by business calls and West Coast conferences. When he was home, his mind wasn't. He fidgeted, avoided eye contact, and rarely answered when she asked, "How was your day?" She could still hear their last argument as if it happened yesterday. She had asked him, just once, to spend an evening together. No phones, no meetings. He snapped. Told her she had no idea how much pressure he was under to keep their lives afloat. He told her she should be more grateful. That night ended with Benjamin slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. He never came back. Days turned into weeks. Emily's calls and texts went unanswered. Then the bank notices arrived. Benjamin had transferred all their joint accounts into his name. Emily had no income. Worse, 2 months later, she found out she was pregnant. The second pink line on the test hit her like a blow. She stared at it in the dim bathroom light, her breath caught somewhere between a sob and silence. The silence was louder than any scream. Any bitterness she'd felt was instantly overtaken by fear. She pressed a hand to her stomach, barely believing what was happening. The questions came fast and cruel. How would she eat? Where would she sleep? How would she raise a child alone? Desperation followed quickly. Rent surged. Her shifts at the coffee shop barely covered groceries, let alone the condo they'd once shared. It didn't take long before she was forced out onto the streets. She had tried calling Benjamin's PR firm, but the line always routed her to a polite assistant who left her on hold until she eventually gave up. Now, staring at his face glowing across the digital billboards in downtown Los Angeles, that whirlwind of betrayal and survival threatened to drown her again. She held on to one promise, one she made to herself in the echo of their old apartment, eviction notice in hand. I will survive. I will protect this child. If Benjamin refused to care, she'd carry that burden alone. She would not become just another faceless statistic in the city's underbelly. The morning brought no relief from the cold. Emily woke on a narrow, squeaky bed in the cheapest motel she could find. The heater rattled uselessly, barely cutting through the chill. She had around $15 left, enough for a sandwich or two, maybe bus fare if she chose carefully. She considered heading to the next shelter, but her resolve wouldn't let her settle. There had to be something more. She packed the little she had, a second set of clothes, her tattered copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, and a cracked screen phone that rarely held a signal. Everything fit into one threadbare bag. Every step outside was like pushing against a wind tunnel. She knew time was running out. Being pregnant and homeless wasn't a challenge. It was a crisis waiting to happen. She headed for the nearest public library, a grand old building with faded columns. She needed warmth. And internet. Maybe a lifeline. Near the community bulletin board, a faded flyer caught her eye. Free women's shelter, hot meals, counseling, prenatal support, no questions asked. She tore off one of the address tabs. This might be my best chance, she thought. For the first time in days, her shoulders eased slightly. She climbed onto the bus, ignoring the looks cast her way. At the end of the ride, the shelter came into view. An aging structure with peeling paint and sagging stairs, tucked into a quiet neighborhood. But the moment she walked through the door, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. A kind woman named Rachel greeted her, clipboard in hand and eyes full of empathy. Emily scribbled her name on the form with a shaky hand. Emily was shown to a small but tidy room shared with 3 other women. Each cot had clean blankets and a narrow side table. Meals are served at 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., Rachel explained, and we have prenatal checkups every Friday with a nurse from Cedar Grove Medical. Emily nearly cried with relief. A medical checkup, something she hadn't had since the moment she found out she was pregnant, felt like a miracle. Rachel stayed a while, gently asking about Emily's story. Though Emily hesitated at first, something in Rachel's calm, caring voice invited honesty. She admitted her husband had left, that he was wealthy, and that she had nowhere else to turn. Rachel listened, never once judging. She simply placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're safe here," she said softly. "You'll find your footing again. I'm here if you need anything." Those words were more than just comfort. They were the first solid support Emily had felt in months. That night, in the quiet hum of the shared room, Emily lay still. The sound of soft breathing surrounded her, her roommates lost in uneasy sleep. Then came a gentle flutter in her belly, her baby stirring. "I'm not alone," she whispered inside. That tiny motion filled her with something she hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. She remembered a line from her worn copy of Emily Dickinson, something about hope being a thing with feathers. It made her think how hope had never truly left, only perched quietly inside her, waiting, even in the darkest moments. The next morning, she stood in line for breakfast. It wasn't fancy, just oatmeal, a banana, and some powdered orange drink, but it was warm, nourishing. As she looked around, she noticed some of the other women eyeing her curiously, maybe even warily. They were all carrying their own battles. Still, there was a quiet recognition in their glances, a kind of unspoken solidarity she hadn't felt in a long time. Rachel joined her at the table. "We have a job support program," she said gently. "Help with resumes, searching for positions, maybe training. I know it's hard without a stable address, but we'll try." Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "That would be amazing," she said, the words catching slightly as gratitude surged up. She was willing to do anything. Cleaning, retail, anything that might earn her enough to put down a deposit on a small apartment. A new start. Later that day, she sat in the lounge, scrolling through job postings. On the corner TV, a business segment played. She almost ignored it until she heard the name, Benjamin Carter. The anchor was praising him as one of the most promising innovators in American tech. A clip played of Mark Cuban calling Benjamin's drive the kind of vision this country needs. Watching it, hearing her husband's name spoken so casually felt like getting hit in the chest. He was bigger than she had imagined, richer, more admired. Emily drew in a slow, steady breath. She turned her eyes away from the screen and told herself, "This is my life now, and I'm not giving up." Emily didn't know if she hated him, missed him, or simply wished none of it had happened. What she did know was this: she had to survive, and she would, on her own terms. At exactly 9 a.m. that Friday, she waited in a makeshift exam room tucked into the shelter's converted rec hall. Faded curtains divided the space. The volunteer nurse, Miss Francis, stepped in briskly, setting down a worn canvas bag filled with medical supplies. She was short, efficient, with sharp but kind eyes. "How are you feeling, dear?" Miss Francis asked as she washed her hands and snapped on a pair of latex gloves. Emily hesitated. She had been brushing off the dull ache in her back, the random waves of nausea, and the bone-deep fatigue that clung to her every day. "Better," she replied, "now that I have somewhere safe to sleep." What she didn't say was that her first night in the shelter had ended with her curled under the covers, shaking from a nightmare. She had woken gasping, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. For a moment, she thought she was still on the sidewalk, cold, alone, with nothing but noise and fear for company. Rachel had found her sitting upright in bed, trembling, and brought her a glass of water without asking questions. Miss Francis nodded, then moved efficiently, taking Emily's vitals, measuring her belly, and gently pressing the Doppler against her skin. The whooshing sound filled the room, steady and strong. Emily's eyes welled up. It was the first time she'd heard her baby's heartbeat. So strong, she thought, pressing her hand to her mouth to contain the emotion. "No concerns right now," Miss Francis said with a soft smile. "But you need to be careful with your nutrition. Eat what you can, high protein, fruits, rest when possible. Stress is no friend to a baby." Emily almost laughed. Stress was the one thing she had in abundance, but she nodded, trying to seem optimistic. Miss Francis made a note in her folder. "We'll need to get you registered at a hospital soon, just in case labor comes early or something unexpected happens. We'll help with that." Then she looked up. "Do you have a support person for prenatal care? A partner or family nearby?" Emily swallowed hard. "My husband isn't around. No other family in the city." The nurse's eyes softened. "Well, you're not alone. We're here to help, okay?" That checkup gave Emily something she hadn't had in weeks. A little confidence. The baby was healthy. That fact grounded her like nothing else. In the afternoons, she committed herself to the job support program. She brushed up on typing, practiced mock interviews with a counselor named Janet. Her English degree helped. She applied for receptionist positions, editorial assistant roles, even part-time tutoring jobs. Most replies were rejections. Employers didn't want someone without a stable address. Others required certifications she didn't have. But Emily didn't give up. Days blurred into weeks. Her belly grew, and so did the weight in her chest. She made daily trips to the library, scanning classifieds, chasing job leads. Sometimes she'd catch a glimpse of the world she used to belong to, Benjamin Carter's world. Headlines boasted about his rapid rise in tech. One morning, the business section ran a glossy photo of him leaving an upscale restaurant. Beside him was a statuesque woman in designer heels, identified as Malene Ashford, potential new business partner. Emily's throat tightened. She caught sight of her reflection in the library window. Her coat rumpled, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. If Benjamin had moved on, both professionally and personally, was she even a memory to him anymore? That evening, the ache in her lower back grew sharper, and with it came the heavy realization that her pregnancy had entered a stage where she could no longer rely on occasional checkups at the shelter. She needed regular care, real care. Soon. Finances haunted her too. Diapers, baby clothes, a crib. Where would those come from? She had placed her name on every assistance list she could find, but the wait times were painfully slow. Government support, it seemed, ran at the speed of molasses. Some nights Emily cried herself to sleep. The future felt like a looming wall she couldn't see past. But each morning she remembered that heartbeat, the steady whoosh-whoosh from the Doppler, and reminded herself, forward. That's the only direction left. On one bitterly cold day, she trudged 3 miles through slushy sidewalks to follow up on a receptionist job. She arrived drenched and freezing, but clung to hope. The manager, a gentle older woman, offered her a temporary position answering phones at a small publishing firm. The pay was low, but it was something. She would start on Monday. As Emily walked out, clutching the folder of onboarding documents, she felt something new, pride. I'm making progress, she told herself. But back at the shelter, Rachel's pale face stopped her in her tracks. We need to talk, Rachel said quietly, guiding her into a quiet hallway corner. Someone came by asking for you. A man in a sharp suit, hair slicked back, left this. She handed Emily a business card. Black and gold, embossed letters spelling out Carter Enterprises. Emily's heart pounded. Did he say anything? She whispered. Just that he needed to speak with you, something personal. Emily stared at the card, her thoughts racing. Could it be one of Benjamin's assistants? His lawyer? Did he somehow know she was pregnant? She never imagined he would actually look for her. Not after all this time. A wave of emotions surged through her. Anger, fear, something like faint hope. Maybe it was time. A reckoning. She took out the pay-as-you-go phone the shelter had helped her get, a small but powerful step toward independence, and turned the card over. The name read, Charles Whitmore, legal counsel. Her fingers trembled as she punched in the number. The dial tone rang once, twice. Her chest tightened. Then, a crisp male voice came through. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Emily Carter, she replied, voice steady despite the storm in her chest. You left your card at the shelter, she said, her voice quieter than she intended. He cleared his throat. Ah, Mrs. Carter, I'm glad you called. Mr. Carter, your husband, would like to arrange a meeting. It concerns financial matters and recent updates to his estate. A cold shiver crept down Emily's spine. Was this about a divorce? Her stomach tightened at the thought, but she forced herself to stay composed. Why now? She asked. The words came out more bitter than she meant. Ma'am, I'm just following instructions, the man replied, voice even. Would you be able to come to Carter Enterprises' main office on 5th Street? Emily hesitated. She had a job orientation scheduled, no professional clothes, no cab fare. I can't, not right away, she said carefully. How about next Tuesday noon? He offered smoothly. We'd be happy to reimburse transportation costs. Mr. Carter understands how difficult the city can be. He specifically requested the meeting be held in a neutral setting. Emily bristled at the carefully chosen words but kept calm. All right, Tuesday. She ended the call, her heart racing. Benjamin wanted to meet. Part of her was furious. How dare he pull her into some legal entanglement after vanishing for months? But another part, quiet but persistent, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he'd acknowledge the baby. Maybe he would step up even just enough to offer child support. She stared at the silent phone, her hand still wrapped around it, knuckles white. A strange ache filled her chest, half dread, half something else. After months of silence, the man who once vowed to stand beside her forever had reached out. And now, he wanted a meeting. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was movement. And for the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't entirely sure if she was ready. Tuesday came faster than she expected. She spent the morning combing through the shelter's donated clothing closet until she found a plain black dress and a coat that stretched tightly over her growing belly. Rachel helped fix her hair into a neat bun. As she prepared to leave, several women in the shelter wished her luck. They didn't know the details, just that she was going to see her ex. The Carter Enterprises tower loomed over 5th Street, all glass and steel. Emily approached it with a deep breath, ignoring the doorman's raised eyebrow. Inside, the marble floor gleamed, and professionals rushed past her in tailored suits and polished shoes. At the center of the lobby stood a sleek sculpture of the Carter C logo, Benjamin's personal brand etched into the city skyline. Charles Whitmore emerged from behind the reception desk, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive watch. He greeted her with a professional nod. "Mrs. Carter, right this way." He led her into a plush conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city's skyline and Griffith Park beyond. The table was polished mahogany, the chairs soft leather. The room radiated wealth. Emily perched at the edge of a chair, feeling like she didn't belong. The door opened. Benjamin walked in. His charcoal suit was custom, his shoes polished, his hair cut with sharp precision. But it was the same face, older now, more polished, more assured. Her throat tightened. He looked at her, then stepped forward with a tentative smile. She rose instinctively, her hand moving to shield her belly. If he noticed, he didn't react. "Emily," he said. "Emily," he said softly, like he was testing the name on his tongue. His eyes flicked down to her belly, then quickly back to her face. "Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were... Are you?" She drew in a sharp breath. "Pregnant," she finished. "Yes, for almost 6 months." A flash of something, shock, maybe guilt, passed through his expression. "I didn't know," he said. You didn't tell me." Anger surged through her. "I tried. You shut everything down. You disappeared. You walked out." Her voice shook as her hands curled into fists. "You were too busy with your empire to even pick up the phone." He looked away, pained. "I'm sorry. I truly am." He sank into the chair across from her, rubbing his temples. "I messed up. I know I did. I've been going through a lot, but that's no excuse." Emily watched him, uncertain whether to believe this was true regret or a polished performance. "So why am I here?" she asked. "Do you need me to sign divorce papers? Is that it?" Benjamin quickly shook his head. No, that's not it at all." He looked to Charles Whitmore, who stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Carter asked me to assist in creating an arrangement to support you financially. Comprehensively," Charles said. "That includes full prenatal care, childbirth costs, and ongoing living expenses. In addition, he would like to set up a trust fund for the child." A swirl of emotions hit her, relief that something concrete was being offered, resentment that he thought money could fix everything, and a quiet flicker of hope she didn't expect. "What about us?" she asked, barely audible. "Our marriage?" Benjamin's eyes darkened. "I want to be there for you, and for our child. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I can do right by you now." He paused, swallowing hard. "As for us, Emily, I know I've caused damage that may be beyond repair. I don't expect forgiveness. Not right away, but maybe with time." Emily didn't know what to say. They felt like strangers. Still, he had acknowledged the baby. That was a beginning. Charles laid out documents detailing monthly allowances, healthcare coverage, and more. The numbers were overwhelming. With those funds, she could rent a real apartment, buy clothes, food, diapers, never worry about basic needs again. But guilt crept in. Could she really accept this? She looked over at Benjamin, voice trembling. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not before?" His jaw tightened. "When I came home and you were gone, I started hearing whispers that you were struggling. I tried to find you. I really did. But the company was scaling fast. Investors, international deals, the chaos of expansion. I kept putting it off." He inhaled sharply, face drawn. "And that was wrong. I realized I couldn't move forward," Benjamin said, his voice quieter now. "Not knowing you might be suffering. You deserved better." "Damn right I did," Emily muttered, eyes burning with tears. She glanced down at the documents spread out before her. They were a temporary fix, maybe even the right move for the baby. But one question lingered in her mind. Could Benjamin Carter ever be part of my life again? She didn't sign anything that day. Instead, she told Charles she needed time to think. Benjamin offered to call her a car. She refused. She needed to walk. to feel the cold air, to clear her head. Before she left, he handed her a small card with his personal cell number. The only gesture that felt remotely personal. She exited the towering building, unsure if she had taken a step toward redemption or deeper into heartbreak. That evening, Emily returned to the shelter in a fog. In the kitchen, she found Rachel ladling soup into bowls, chatting softly with residents. The weight of the day pressed down on Emily as she pulled her aside. In a quiet corner, she told Rachel everything. The meeting, the offer, the staggering sums printed across the pages. She even showed her the paperwork. "Wow," Rachel murmured, flipping through the agreement. "I've never seen this many zeros in one place." She paused, looked up. "So, what are you going to do?" Emily sank into a chair, her shoulders heavy. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's the only sensible decision. The baby deserves stability. A home, not this." She placed a hand on her stomach. "But another part of me is scared he's just trying to buy peace of mind. That if I accept, I'm giving up my dignity." Rachel laid a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's not about dignity, Emily. It's about what's right for you and your child. You've carried so much alone. You deserve support. Taking help doesn't mean letting him back into your life, unless you want to." Those words soothed her, even if her thoughts were still tangled. Her mind drifted back to late nights with Benjamin, laughing over dollar pizza, dozing off as he read code aloud with excitement. Is that man still in there? She wondered. Somewhere beneath the tailored suits and television interviews? But as her thoughts swirled, another feeling crept in. Something quieter, sharper, shame. Not because of what he'd done, but because of how much she had once relied on him. In the early years, she'd let herself lean too far, trust too blindly. She had wrapped her future in his ambition, without building enough of her own. That realization stung, not with regret, but with resolve. Never again. This time, any step she took would be on her own 2 feet. The memory ached. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a reckoning. She had loved him. Maybe she still did, buried beneath resentment and grief, but she had also learned to survive without him. Could she trust herself to let him in again? Or would she end up shattered once more? A part of her still yearned for closure or maybe something more, but the hurt was still too close. The betrayal too deep. The baby, however, had to come first. That night, she sat quietly in her bunk and went over the documents again. She marked questions, scribbled notes in the margins, determined not to sign anything she didn't fully understand. If Benjamin's remorse was real, maybe she could accept the support, for now, and see what came next. She set the papers aside with a sigh, making a mental note to reach out to Charles in a few days. In the meantime, her part-time receptionist job was starting. She commuted by bus, then transferred to the subway, finally arriving at a modest building tucked into Midtown Los Angeles. The small publishing house was lively but informal. Manuscripts stacked on desks, coffee mugs everywhere, editors debating punctuation like the fate of the world depended on it. On her first day, Emily answered phones, greeted visitors, and made coffee runs for meetings. By lunchtime, she was drained, but inside her stirred something she hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet, steady pride. "I'm working. I'm making progress." During a short break, she checked her phone and saw a new message from Benjamin. "Please let me know if you have any questions about the agreement. Also, I hope you're doing well." So formal, yet something in it felt tentative, careful. Emily stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Finally, she typed, "I'm still thinking. I'm safe, thanks." She hit send, heart pounding. Then, forcing herself to refocus, she got back to work. Over the next week, she made her decision. She emailed Charles Whitmore, agreeing to the financial support, but laid out her conditions clearly. She wanted full independence. The apartment had to be in her name. It should be close to the shelter, where she still found strength in the supportive community. She needed the right to make all medical and personal choices for the baby. If Benjamin wanted to be involved, they could figure out visitation and co-parenting in time. To her surprise, there was no pushback, no negotiating. Benjamin agreed to everything. He even sent over a lease for a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, rent fully paid for the next 12 months. Emily stared at the email, stunned. He's stepping up, she thought. Maybe there was still a trace of the Benjamin she once loved, but was she ready for anything more than just this arrangement? One late night, unable to sleep, She picked up the phone and impulsively dialed his number. He answered instantly. "Emily?" he said, voice tight. She hesitated, then said, "I just wanted to thank you for the help." A pause, then a soft exhale. "Of course," he murmured. "It's the least I can do." Her voice wavered. "This baby, Benjamin, it's ours. He or she deserves two parents who, at the very least, respect each other." He replied, almost whispering, "I'd like that. I'd like to earn your respect again. Maybe even your forgiveness." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She remembered the nights they used to talk for hours, dreaming, planning. She still had so many questions. Why he left, what had really driven his success, whether there was any love still buried under all that ambition. But she didn't ask, not yet. "Good night, Benjamin," she said softly, then ended the call. By the time Emily reached her 7th month of pregnancy, her life had transformed. With Benjamin's financial support, she moved into the small apartment, cozy, with cream-colored walls that warmed the space. There was even a spare room, which she'd begun to convert into a nursery. The furniture was minimal, just a sofa, a bed, and a kitchen table. But it was hers. Her name was on the lease, her own space, her own start. At the publishing house, things had become a little more stable. Her manager had noticed Emily's punctuality and quiet dedication and extended her contract for another 3 months. With the baby on the way, Emily wasn't sure how long she'd be able to keep up the work. For now, she had a rhythm, a reason. Each day had shape and meaning. Wake up, check emails, head to work, come home, carve out 30 minutes for writing story ideas, then rest. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Still, when she lay in bed at night, the quiet sometimes brought questions she couldn't ignore. Would she know how to be a mother? Could she raise a child in a world that had shown her so little mercy? There were moments, fleeting but sharp, when she feared she wouldn't be enough. Not educated enough in parenting, not stable enough financially, not healed enough emotionally. The brochures and advice from the shelter helped, but they couldn't quiet the inner voice that whispered, "What if you fail this baby too?" She still visited the shelter now and then, volunteering to help new arrivals, just as Rachel had once helped her. A kind word, a little hope. It mattered. One chilly afternoon there was a knock at her door. Emily opened it and froze. Benjamin stood there, holding a small bouquet of lilies in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. Her heart beat faster as she took in his nervous smile. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay." She hesitated. She had never shared her exact address with him. Charles must have. She'd been so careful about boundaries, fighting against the feeling of being controlled again. But she nodded, quietly stepped aside. He handed her the flowers, and she placed them in a plain vase on the kitchen table. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the grocery bag. "Fresh fruit, vitamins, and a jacket. Thought you might need it. It's getting colder." The gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly, smoothing a hand over her belly. His eyes moved around the room, absorbing the modest decor, the bare walls. "It's nice, cozy," he offered, trying to fill the silence. He looked at her belly again, then back at her face. "May I ask, do you know the baby's gender?" She shook her head. "I want it to be a surprise." "That's wonderful," he said, glancing down and fidgeting with the bag. Then, after a breath, "Emily, I know showing up like this might feel like a lot. I'm trying to respect your space, I really am, but I'd also like to be more involved." He paused. "Doctor appointments, the nursery, anything you need, I'd like to help." Emily studied him, and for the first time in a long while she saw something behind his eyes. Sincerity. Not performance, not guilt. Something real. "Why now?" she asked. She remembered all the cold nights spent on the street, clutching her coat while he wined and dined investors. Benjamin's shoulders dropped. "When I left, I was consumed by my ambition. I convinced myself I couldn't manage a relationship. I was afraid of failing, so I did fail, spectacularly. I failed you, in the worst possible way." He looked down, shame softening his voice. "And then, when the success finally came, I felt more hollow than ever. All I had was money, status, and this hollow sense of accomplishment," Benjamin said, his voice quieter now. "I realize none of it means anything without love, without people who actually care about you." He paused, his voice rough with vulnerability. "I guess I'm trying to atone. I can't fix the past, but I can be here now." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. The sincerity in his voice shook something inside her. I appreciate the honesty, she said slowly. She wasn't sure if it was the truth or if guilt was driving him now that she was visibly pregnant and clearly struggling. But still, part of her, the part that remembered the man who used to dream beside her, laugh with her, wanted to believe him. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, gesturing toward the kettle on the stove. He nodded, grateful. They sat together at the small kitchen table, sipping quietly. The hum of city traffic floated through the window. Neither of them knew how to fix a broken marriage in one afternoon, but they were both there, trying. After a long moment, Benjamin cleared his throat. "I'd like to come to your next prenatal appointment. If you'll let me, I can drive or whatever's easier for you." She hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. That would be nice. Deep down, a flicker of something warm lit up, something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. At her next appointment at Cedar Grove Medical, Benjamin accompanied her. Miss Francis, the shelter nurse who volunteered part-time at the clinic, greeted them warmly. But Emily noticed a few glances from the staff. Recognition. Of course they knew him. His face was on magazine covers and financial news segments. To his credit, he didn't show off. He held Emily's coat while she changed into a gown. He asked the doctor quiet, thoughtful questions about the baby's development. And when the rhythmic thump of the baby's heartbeat filled the room again, she saw it. Tears in his eyes. A powerful wave of emotion swept through her. It was the first time she realized he truly cared, not just about her, but about their child. As they left, he placed a gentle hand on her back to guide her through the busy hallway. She let him. It was a small gesture, but comforting. In the hospital lobby, they ran into someone unexpected. Barbara Carter, Benjamin's mother. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore an elegant coat that screamed designer. She froze when she saw them, her son beside Emily. Her gaze dropped to Emily's rounded belly, then shot back up. "I heard rumors," she said coldly, "but I thought you two were finished." Emily instinctively tensed. She remembered the unease that had always hovered between her and Barbara, polite on the surface but laced with judgment. Barbara had never hidden her disapproval of Emily's background. Barbara's sharp gaze didn't waver. She had always blamed Emily for being a distraction, for pulling Benjamin away from what she considered greater things. But Benjamin stood tall, his tone clear and firm. "Mother, this is Emily, my wife, and she's pregnant with our child." Barbara's lips tightened into a razor-thin line. "So you're reconciling?" she asked, voice laced with quiet contempt. Emily didn't flinch. "I wouldn't call it that," she said calmly. "We're trying to figure things out, for the baby's sake." Barbara sniffed, the disdain in her eyes impossible to miss. "Benjamin, you have too many responsibilities to let past mistakes drag you down." She looked at Emily as if she were a trespasser, not family. "Why didn't you tell him sooner?" Emily's chest burned. "I tried," she said, voice rising. "He left. I had no way to reach him. And for the record, I wouldn't call carrying your grandchild a mistake." Benjamin stepped forward and gently took his mother's arm. "That's enough, Mother." His tone was low but unwavering. "This baby is my responsibility, and I won't let you talk to Emily like that. Not here. Not now." "We'll talk later, Benjamin," Barbara said, her tone clipped. She cast Emily one last scornful glance, then turned and walked away. Emily's heart pounded as curious glances from the hospital staff and patients surrounded them. She blinked quickly, holding back tears. The embarrassment of the confrontation lingered like a fog. Her fists clenched at her sides, not out of anger, but to keep herself from crumbling. The old shame that Barbara had once instilled in her began to surface, but she refused to let it take hold. She had come too far, survived too much. "I'm sorry," Benjamin said gently. "She had no right to speak to you like that." Emily's mind reeled. She remembered all too well the things Barbara had once said, that she wasn't worthy of her son, that she was a burden, not a partner, that her dreams of being a writer were naive. Now, with Benjamin wealthy and re-established, it was clear. His family still saw her as an obstacle. "It's fine," Emily murmured, even as her trembling hands betrayed her. "I'll manage." They stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the tension lingering between them. "Please," Benjamin said, "don't let her get to you. She doesn't speak for me." Emily nodded, her voice steady. "I won't. But if we're going to co-parent, I need to know you'll stand by me, that you won't let her or anyone sway your decisions. I promise, he said, eyes sincere. She studied him for a beat longer, gauging the weight of that promise. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the tiny life growing inside her, the one she had vowed to protect at all costs. And though the promise sounded real, Emily couldn't ignore the lingering chill. She remembered all too well the nights Barbara had ridiculed her dreams, questioned her worth, and undermined her confidence. Would that same bitterness seep into their child's world? Or had Benjamin changed enough to protect them from it? On the ride back to her apartment, the silence between them was heavy. Benjamin tried to make small talk, about the nursery, about the due date, but Emily was lost in her thoughts. Then, in a rare show of vulnerability, he spoke softly. My mother, she's always been controlling. Part of the reason I left was because I couldn't breathe under her expectations, the pressure to succeed, to impress. He glanced at her. I let that pressure drown what we had. I'm sorry, Emily. She tightened her grip on the seatbelt, her voice calm. What's done is done. Let's just focus on the future, on doing right by this baby. That's all that matters, she told herself. Still inside, her emotions swirled. Could we really have a future together? Emily wondered. Or is this just going to be co-parenting with a man I once loved? At her apartment door, Benjamin lingered for a moment. Call me if you need anything, he said gently. She nodded, uncertain if she'd ever be ready to let him fully back into her life. The final weeks of Emily's pregnancy came with a rush of conflicting emotions. Her body felt heavy, every movement a chore. Sleep was rare, replaced by a mix of anticipation and quiet anxiety about the birth. Benjamin visited often, bringing practical things, maternity clothes, healthy groceries, baby supplies. They talked logistics, pediatricians, childcare, name ideas. But the question between them, what are we now, remained unanswered. At times their connection re-emerged. They laughed over a tiny onesie printed with a cartoon lion. They reminisced about college, about old dreams. In those moments, Emily saw glimmers of the man she once trusted completely. His eyes kind, his presence grounding. But shadows remained. She couldn't forget the bitter winter nights, the sidewalks, the silence. While he soared to tech fame, she had fought to survive. Trust wouldn't come easy. Not anymore. One evening, as she tapped away on a short story, a passion she had only recently dared to rediscover, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Benjamin, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, holding a large container. You mentioned chicken soup last week, he said with a sheepish smile. I had my chef make some. Don't worry, I didn't cook it myself. That would have ended badly. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. Thank you. That's really thoughtful. He set the soup on the counter, his eyes drifting to the papers spread across the table. Are you writing again? She flushed, nodding. Just trying to find my voice again? Something for me to reconnect. Can I read a bit? He asked. She hesitated, then handed him a few pages. He read silently, eyes scanning line by line. When he looked up, his expression softened. This is really good, he said, voice low with admiration. I forgot how talented you are. Emily swallowed. Her heart fluttered. He was seeing her, not as someone fragile, not as a burden, but as someone with something to say, someone whole. And in that moment, it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about recognition, being seen not just as a mother or a woman he'd wronged, but as the person she had always been underneath the pain. She watched the way his eyes moved over her words, not with pity, but with respect. That made her throat tighten more than any apology ever could. Thank you, she whispered. They talked about the story, about a lone traveler finding hope in unexpected places. Their conversation moved easily, almost like it used to. It felt like a beginning. At one point, he gently rested a hand on her belly. The baby kicked, and a smile passed between them, something soft, unspoken, and fragile, tender, yet uncertain. Later that night, as he stood at her door preparing to leave, Emily hesitated. Benjamin, she said softly, I just want you to know, I see you trying, and I appreciate it. He exhaled, relief evident in his face. I'll keep trying, Emily. But the next day, everything unraveled. Benjamin called her in a panic, his voice tight. Turn on the news. Another scandal had erupted, this time involving Carter Enterprises. Accusations of questionable stock trading filled the headlines. Rumors swirled that Barbara Carter had been orchestrating shady deals behind the scenes. Benjamin's name was splashed across screens, his entire business empire cast in doubt. Emily turned on her old TV just in time to see reporters clustered outside the company's headquarters. A few sensational outlets aired a photo of her from months ago, speculating that she was the hidden wife carrying the heir to a now disgraced dynasty. She felt sick. Was she about to be dragged into this storm? A text from Benjamin arrived. "I'm so sorry. This is out of control. I never wanted you to get pulled into this." She tried not to panic, but the tension was overwhelming. And within hours, she felt it. Mild contractions. Just 36 weeks. Early, but still within the safe zone. They weren't strong yet, but they were there. She called Miss Slave, Frances, who advised her to rest, hydrate, and come to the hospital if the contractions grew more regular. Night fell, and the media circus only intensified. Tabloids speculated about Barbara's role, airing a stern photo of her refusing comment outside her estate. Commentators whispered that Benjamin's entire fortune might collapse. Emily didn't care about the money, but she feared for the baby. Would their child grow up haunted by this scandal? When Benjamin arrived at her apartment, he looked wrecked, unshaven, sleepless. "I'm so sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea my mother was involved in any of this. I've already fired everyone who played a role, but the damage—" He didn't finish the sentence. Emily tried to stay calm, but another contraction hit, stronger this time. She winced. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping toward her. "I think," she said, catching her breath, "I might be going into labor." His face paled. In that instant, every headline, every scandal faded away. "Let's get you to the hospital," he said, his voice gentle. He helped her grab her bag, steadied her through the doorway. And as they left the apartment, Emily realized a new chapter was beginning. Whatever storms raged beyond the hospital walls, Emily knew one thing. She was about to bring a child into the world, and she needed Benjamin's unwavering support. Inside the maternity wing at Cedar Grove Medical, time blurred into fluorescent lights, murmured instructions, and waves of pain. Emily was admitted with mild contractions, which escalated into full labor by midnight. Benjamin never left her side, gripping her hand through each surge, his face pale with worry. Emily shifted between tears and labored breaths, clinging to the hope that soon she'd meet her baby. The night was intense. At one point, the baby's heart rate dropped. Alarms sounded. Nurses swarmed. Fear sliced through her. She locked eyes with Benjamin, and in that glance, she saw the same terror mirrored back. In that moment, everything else disappeared. No business, no headlines, just the two of them. Terrified, vulnerable, united by love for the life they had created. The heart rate stabilized. Relief flooded the room. Hours crawled by until dawn broke in soft, pink streaks across the sky. Then came the urge to push. The nurses guided her, voices strong and steady. Emily felt like her body had split open, every muscle on fire. Benjamin whispered encouragement, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. And then, with one final cry, she felt it. Release. Then the piercing, beautiful sound of a baby's first wail. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, flailing newborn. A wave of emotion surged through Emily. Love, relief, disbelief. They laid the baby on her chest, and she gasped at the heat of that tiny body. For a moment, everything else fell away. The betrayal, the loneliness, the fear. All of it dissolved into the weight of this fragile life against her skin. But even as joy bloomed in her chest, another sensation stirred beneath it. Uncertainty. Could she really do this? Would she know how to be enough? Enough love, enough safety, enough strength. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Benjamin's eyes shimmered too, his usual composure shattered in the best way. "Welcome to the world," Emily whispered, her voice cracked with awe. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's damp forehead. The baby calmed, opening her eyes just briefly, as if trying to find her mother. Later, they moved Emily to a recovery room. Benjamin paced the hallway, balancing work calls with quiet check-ins. But he always came back, always smiled when he saw them curled together in the dim hospital light, like the chaos outside had no power here. Barbara tried to visit. Emily declined. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Meanwhile, news from the outside world trickled in. The scandal at Carter Enterprises was stabilizing. Benjamin had stepped up, taking full responsibility for the lack of oversight and cooperating with regulators. No cover-ups, no evasion. He was trying to rebuild, not hide. 2 days passed, a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and fitful naps. Emily watched Benjamin cradle their daughter, amazed by the tenderness in his hands. She'd never imagined this moment, never thought he'd be so soft, present. They hadn't picked a name yet. Emily had cycled through half a dozen favorite names, but as she gazed into her daughter's wide, curious eyes, one name settled in her heart: Hope. It felt right. This tiny girl was the embodiment of new beginnings. When discharge day arrived, Benjamin insisted on driving them home. He carried the car seat with gentle care, setting it by the living room couch. Emily unbuckled Hope slowly, lifting her into her arms. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet apartment. Only soft baby sighs broke the stillness. "I want to make a promise," Benjamin said, his voice low. "To be here, for you and Hope. Always. I know I can't rewrite the past, but I will do everything I can to build a better future." Emily looked at him, then at the baby nestled in her arms, her heart filled with a swirl of feelings: uncertainty, gratitude, and the cautious stirring of something deeper. "It won't be easy," she whispered. "There's a lot to work through, but I'd like to try." Relief washed over his face. "We'll go at your pace," he said. "Whatever you need." She nodded, eyes glistening. Over his shoulder she caught their reflection in the window. Herself, Benjamin, and Hope cradled in his arms. A fragile, imperfect family portrait. Maybe fate had brought them full circle. This child, Hope, now linked them in a way that neither betrayal nor success could undo. In the weeks that followed, they navigated their uncertain path together. Benjamin balanced boardrooms with bottle feedings, often losing track of time while watching his daughter sleep. Emily began to let her guard down. Slowly, carefully. Forgiveness, she realized, would be a journey. But she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. Each day, she felt stronger. Each day, baby Hope grew, living proof that something beautiful could rise from the wreckage. Whether Emily and Benjamin would fully find their way back to each other remained to be seen. But for the first time, she believed in second chances. In a world as unpredictable as theirs, one truth had become clear. Love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. From frigid sidewalks to the quiet light of a new family home, Emily and Benjamin's story reminds us that life rarely unfolds the way we plan. But in even the darkest moments, hope can spark miracles. Dear friends, if you're still here with me now, after everything, Emily's heartbreak, her resolve, and that final fragile moment of grace, then perhaps something in her story has quietly reached into your own heart. Life, as the Stoics remind us, does not promise fairness. It promises truth. As Epictetus once wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Emily reacted with quiet courage, not in grand declarations, but in daily steps: a shelter, a job, a conversation, and ultimately a new life named Hope. We often think healing looks like fireworks, but sometimes it's just the simple act of not giving up when the world feels coldest. So let this story be a gentle reminder. Even in our lowest seasons, we still have the power to choose love over resentment, effort over retreat, and truth over pride. There is no perfect path, only a direction. And sometimes choosing to walk it slowly, deliberately, is the bravest thing of all. If Emily's journey resonated with you in any way, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing to our channel for more stories that matter. Your support helps us keep creating with heart.